views and opinions expressed in this program are those of the participants and do not necessarily reflect the views of BronxNet or the program underwriters.
And hello, everyone, and welcome to Open, the one and only show that opens the Bronx and the rest of the world right to you. I'm your host, Daren Jaime, and today we'll update you on what's happening in and around our borough, as well as across New York City. Coming up on today's show, we go front and center discussing the recent changes to New York City employment laws and what it will mean moving forward. Afterwards, we'll learn about how a new initiative supporting the parents and caregivers of young children will go into effect. We'll let you know more about that. Then we'll talk about a book that's providing people with the central themes and basics of the Bible. Also, we'll learn about a podcast that is actually providing Holocaust survivors a voice and also hope in a time such as this. And then finally, we'll sit down with a representative from City Island's Black-owned seafood restaurant, the first of its kind. We'll give you more details a little later on in the show. We encourage you to stay tuned because all this and much more is heading your way. Right now, we're officially open. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Open. I am Daren Jaime. You are watching the show that brings the Bronx and New York straight to you. We also want to welcome our viewers on Manhattan Neighborhood Network, as Open is being broadcast live simultaneously on the MNN channel. You're also invited to stay connected to us on our social media platforms at BronxNet TV. And if you want to know more about our station, don't hesitate to go to our website at bronxnet.org. A lot has certainly been going on through the course of these past week, but we'll take it to a couple of things with our Bronx updates. We start off with legal news, and it's about to get brighter. The Senate unanimously passed a measure making daylight savings time permanent across the United States beginning next year. The bipartisan bill, named the Sunshine Protection Act, which ensured that all Americans would no longer have to change their clocks twice a year. But the bill still needs approval from the House and the signature of President Joe Biden to become law. And in other news, after the tragic Twin Parks fire, Bronx community members and mutual aid organizers are urging for the release and distribution of funds, as well as donations that were originally promised to families in need. Our BronxNet reporter Sanji Lopez brings us the details of this story.
If you want to help financially, we have the Mayor's Fund to Advance New York. Every dollar raised will go directly to the family members that are involved. So this way we can help families in a real way.
Since that press briefing back in January, the Mayor's Fund has raised up to $4.4 million for Bronx families affected by the tragic Twin Parks Northwest fire. Bronx-bred celebrities like Fat Joe and Cardi B partner with the Mayor's office to raise additional funds. According to new information from City Hall, the Mayor's Fund has contributed a total of $900,000 to food contracts, burial services, flights, and cash assistance. However, tenants and community members now wonder where the rest of the funds are, as they urge for the release and distribution of the donations promised to families in need.
It's alarming when now it's been 60 days since the fire. We still have so many families that are displaced, that are still in shelter hotels, that are not able to permanently transfer to long-term housing. They need to replace damaged items, they need to furnish new apartments, and unfortunately that money is needed.
We feel abandoned by the city and by our elected officials. They have called the first week of the fire. They said they were going to do everything in their powers to help us. They haven't done anything so far. In other words, We were first victim of the fire, now we're victim of the system.
We reached out to the mayor's office for comment but have not heard back. In a recent interview with Hot 97, Bronx Borough President Vanessa Gibson shared this public update.
We were under the impression that there would be a series of payments that would come right after that from the mayor's fund. This is really about communication and about accountability and about understanding what the process is. I don't oversee the mayor's fund. I have confidence that the staff are running it well, and I trusted that they were doing the job that they needed to do.
Volunteers working directly with affected families like South Bronx Mutual Aid recently flagged issues with food distribution. They shared that meals have been continuously left in unmarked boxes on the floor in hotel lobbies. Some meals, like this mushroom dish, even sat out undiscovered and untouched for over 24 hours. Organizers also noted that back in March, families abruptly stopped receiving meals. The BP's office has reportedly since stepped in to address this food issue. Tenants like Yadira and Yamina share that through all this, they are still expected to pay rent.
El mes de la renta tenemos que pagarla.
Y viviendo en la calle.
Entonces, yo no estoy viviendo en mi apartamento. Nosotras dos tenemos de los apartamentos que fueron más afectados.
Families need housing, not hotels. Families need to have stability and security after this crisis. And unfortunately, if they're told that a significant sum of money was raised in their name, but they can't finalize their permanent housing because they need to make sure that that other piece is in place that they've been promised, then we're part of that accountability piece to make sure that what was promised to families is being delivered in a timely manner.
The mayor's fund has nothing to do with the taxes and the money that we paid and all that. This is money that was raised only and solely for this cost. So why we were affected by this cost and we not receiving the funds? If they're not capable of doing their job, they should resign.
Reporting for BronxNet, Sonji Lopez.
And thank you, Sanji. That is all the time we have for our updates. Of course, we'll follow this story and a whole lot more. We want you to stay with us because we got a full show. Open continues coming up right after this. And welcome back. Beginning in May, a new law will take effect, making it illegal for most New York employers to exclude pay ranges from their advertised jobs or promotion opportunities. Now, this will reveal what workers in one of the country's most expensive talent markets stand to earn and make it easier for New York-based job seekers to know where to start negotiating. What will that mean moving forward? And then also we talk about new legislation through President Biden. What exactly does it mean for you? Joining us now to share more details is the founding partner of the Boyd Lloyd Group. We've got Patrick Boyd with us. And Patrick, good to have you.
Nice to be here again.
Thank you. And let's start off with national news first. President Biden making a signing. And what does that mean, particularly in the area of law?
Well, so very interesting and important development. There's been a trend recently, which we've talked about before, as to permitting more disclosure and transparency as to gender discrimination and sexual harassment. And a lot of employees in the past, when they start jobs, they're forced to sign a document that mandates that they arbitrate sexual harassment claims, meaning they are deprived of a right to a judge or a jury trial for that matter. Biden's new law, as of the 3rd, precludes that kind of prohibition. That is, if you have a sexual harassment case, you have an absolute right to a jury trial. You cannot be forced to arbitrate the case. That helps for awareness of the discrimination issues that women have faced historically. And quite frankly, it helps the public overall, because more jury trials means more people having access to and understanding of these things that women have been enduring. So very, very interesting development and a positive one. Perhaps another interesting point to the law, which does not always happen with new law, it is retroactive. So it's not a prohibition saying employees can't sign it now and be forced to arbitrate, but rather it says if you signed in the past, that will or that requirement that you arbitrate is out the window. You now have that right to a jury trial, no matter what. Very important change.
And yeah, and when we talk about this, is about 60 million Americans that are actually going to be affected by this.
That's right. That's right. And an interesting point, which is a sort of narrow band of observation that I think is useful, is that the choice still exists. And I'll point it out this way. Victims of sexual harassment certainly have the right and opportunity to have a jury trial now, which is great. But some of them very much want these personal kinds of allegations kept quiet and private, and still would like the opportunity to have arbitration. The employees aren't precluded from that either. That is, the new law just gives them that choice. They can choose to have the private arbitration if they so choose, and they also have the right to go to court. So it's a win-win for employees, and I would argue in a democracy for everybody, because there's more transparency and more ability to understand what's going on in our laws and in our country.
Talk to me a little bit about what's going on also in the world of pay, because we talk about pay transparency here in New York City. And when we look at the laws, there's going to be some changes when it comes to pay transparency. Knowing actually what a salary is and having negotiation power, that's something that's new as well.
That's right. That's right. And I think you said it best with that observation as to negotiation power. What this law coming forth in my mom's birthday, May 15th, now requires is that employers with job openings post not just the job, but the salary range of that job, and to post that range in good faith. So number one, as a prospective employee, you know, walking into that job interview, what kind of salary range you can expect, right? And interestingly enough, number two, if you're a current employee working somewhere and there's another, you're being paid fairly, because you can see that salary range being offered to the new hire, right? The thought with this law, which is part of a trend, a couple of states have passed similar laws, is that this transparency will allow for fairness and prohibit some of the institutional discrimination as to things like wages that were historically part of the process. Used to be people were shy about asking their colleague how much they were making. Now there's no issue with that. It's going to be out there on the job advertisement all the time. And there's probably going to be some meaningful leveling of salaries as a result, which is a good thing for sure.
Yeah, when we talk about this, though, let's look at where New York is. You've got New York, who is just on the beginning side of this, because a lot of states have not yet adopted this policy. We know that California and a couple of others are at the forefront, but we really are at the beginning of it compared to other states.
That's right. In a way that we were way behind on the whistleblower protections that we've talked about before, we were ahead on this one when it comes to pay disclosure, and I think that's useful. One note, as New Yorkers, I think it's important to consider is that this helps, but is not perfect in some ways when you start to think about jobs that have large bonus or commission components, right? What the disclosure requirements say is you're supposed to in good faith disclose pay. But if you're on Wall Street, for example, there's bonuses and added compensation that's not going to be part of that disclosure. If you're perhaps a salaried or a commissioned person, that salary disclosure is not necessarily going to be part of the posting at this point. So it helps. It's going to impact a lot of people. I think it's going to change the marketplace, but there are still a vast array of jobs that aren't necessarily going to be impacted by this disclosure, particularly when you start to think about bonus jobs in Wall Street, which is at least an important component to the New York economy.
When we look at what's happening right now, though, post-COVID-19, well, I won't say post because we're still in it, but getting further and closer towards the end, we can see a lot of changes happening in the area of employment. We've got people who are working from home, right? You've got people now talking about unions. We've got the whistleblower policy. And so in a shorter matter of time, we've seen a lot of changes in the employment field.
That's right. A lot of new legislation, and I think we would all say, or I don't want to speak for a lot of people would say, a lot of change in the mindset of employees as well, in terms of having had a chance with COVID to evaluate their priorities, evaluate their preferences, to consider how much they might or might not enjoy remote work, how much they might or might not need to be in the office, and quite frankly, how much they might or might not enjoy their jobs, period, full stop. So the trend with union organizing to make collective rights stronger, the trend with salary negotiations being more powerful because of this pay disclosure law, the trend with whistleblower protections becoming stronger. I think employees, the pendulum is shifting, and employees are going to have a greater say in the way that they work and function, and hopefully in the way they enjoy their jobs.
As we're getting close to the end of the first quarter, we're moving into quarter number 2. What can we anticipate to look at on the docket as potential things that could be coming our way that we should be looking out for?
Well, there certainly are these trends to the legislation, which we've talked about, but I think the great unknown is probably the most important ingredient. On the one hand, we have far more job openings than we have candidates at this point, which would seemingly influence and allow for employees to have more leverage. But on the other hand, I think we all know that COVID is still a question mark, and the war is having a meaningful influence on the economy and the stock market and the optimism or lack thereof that people have. So I think there's going to be a push-pull on that, and I don't know where we're ultimately going to come out with a resolution. Some employees may be very eager to just hunker down and make sure they have job security and not overly bargain at this point because they're concerned about the volatility of the world. Some employers may feel the same way about growth. And on the other hand, if everything settles, I think we have a recipe for great success and enjoyment. But there are factors beyond our control, perhaps, that are going to weigh in on what happens next.
Give me your assessment of the court system right now as we're coming to this place where we're opening up a little bit more. We're seeing more activity. We hear a lot about bottlenecks and cases that have been hanging out there for years. What are you seeing? Are you seeing a little bit more movement? Are you seeing a little bit more traction?
Certainly more traction, a little bit more efficiency as well. I think some of the judges and clerks have learned that they can have more court conferences by Zoom in an hour than they could in person. And so they're taking advantage of that and learning from that. There are absolutely cases that have been lingering on the dockets that are going to have to be cleared still. And so a bottleneck to be worked through at this point. But overall, with the courts, there are some efficiency lessons that have been learned that are very much going to hopefully change the process to our benefit. And we'll get faster, more crisp decisions, more online filing opportunities, and those kind of things, which ultimately help and get justice moving a little bit more quickly.
Yeah. Do we see more settlements? Because I know that that's one of the things that we're talking about, knowing that you're going to be in a place where this might take a few minutes. If a client is short on cash, we know that settlements are the way to go. Are we seeing more settlements?
I think there's a combination of things going on. On the one hand, I think during the initial part of COVID, there were a lot of settlements based on that notion that the trajectory was long and hard for litigation. Now that the courts are back in full capacity or close, I think that appetite for resolution is not as strong as it might once have been. So I would say slightly less as opposed to more, as people are looking forward to perhaps their day in court, their argument in court, and their opportunity in court. One thing that I heard a colleague mention that I thought was useful, or at least a powerful observation, is that sometimes the milling about in person in the court system leads to resolution. You see an attorney, you argue in front of the judge, and then you meet in the courthouse hallways or whatever and talk a little bit more about your case and resolve the case. That's not really returning as much still, Daren, because quite frankly, more people are still Zooming and not going into the court system. So some of those valuable conversations as to settlement are not happening just because people are not in person talking about their cases the way they once were. So that's sort of a con to the new process, if you will.
Well, a lot to pay attention to, Patrick. Thank you so much for being with us. Certainly, we will have you back as we continue to discuss this and hash this out. Patrick Boyd from the Boyd Law Group. Now, for more information, you can visit the website at theboydlawgroup.com, and then also follow him on Facebook and Instagram at the Boyd Law Group. And so I want to let you know we've got more show. Don't go anywhere. We're coming up right after this. And Patrick, again, thanks for joining us.
My pleasure, as always. Take care.
All righty, we'll be right back. Welcome back. Robinhood recently announced the initial winners of Fuel for 50, which is an initiative to support actually young children's learning and development through programs focused on their caregivers. Now, these 50 awards are Robinhood's latest investments in a 6-year commitment to make New York City a for cultivating and scaling new approaches to supporting the development of children ages 0 to 3. And joining us now to share more, we've got the Associate Director at Robin Hood, I should say the Field Associate at Robin Hood, David Hernandez, and the Director of Adult Services at Kingsbridge Heights Community Center, Alex Martinez. And welcome you both to the show. I'll begin with you, David. I'll try to give you a couple of titles, but take this one and tell us a little bit about the Fuel for 50, because it's a very special initiative that is reaching a very vulnerable population.
Yeah, thank you, Daren, for having us. Yeah, agreed. You know, it's a $10 million initiative focused on the 0 to 3-year-old population. And the way we do that is by focusing on their parents and caregivers. So we know that we should be reducing sources of stress for parents. We should be building nurturing relationships between parent and child, and really increasing that early literacy and core socio-emotional skills for young children. And we're really proud that we have 50 organizations that are all doing really incredible work. Can't wait for you to hear from Kingsbridge later on, but just like Kingsbridge, we have 49 other organizations doing things from, you know, running food pantries to providing mental health services, job training, really everything and anything you can think of to support parents of young children. So really, really happy to be here with you today.
Yeah, thank you for coming and being with us. And we want to let you know that one of those awardees we have with us right now, we've got Alex Martinez, and she's the Director of Adult Services at the Kingsbridge Heights Community Center. And the Khcc were awarded a $25,000 grant in funding as well. So talk to us, first of all, Alex, about what it means to receive this award.
Oh my goodness. It is truly an honor. We're now this week 2 years into COVID. And so to be recognized by Robin Hood and by this initiative as an agency doing really powerful work in the Bronx is just really uplifting and inspiring, and just motivates us to keep doing this amazing work.
And if somebody doesn't know about the services you provide, talk to us about what services are available.
Yeah, so Kingsbridge Heights Community Center, we shorten it as KHCC because it's a little bit of a mouthful. We are a multi-service agency in the Bronx, and so we're a settlement house. So we have services and programming for children, or for parents expecting, all the way through adulthood. And so the Khcc Connect program is our agency-wide assessment and case management program. So we are the program within the agency that assesses families across all of our programs and departments, and really wraps them around in the services and resources that they need to be able to thrive and meet the goals that they have for themselves, as well as just stabilize too. We serve a large immigrant community who oftentimes doesn't have access or information on what is available to them. We serve a lot of mixed status families, so a lot of the folks might be undocumented or fearful of immigration repercussions. And so we are kind of that safety net for a lot of these families, because as David shared, we know that in order for our children to thrive, our parents need to be thriving too. And so we really focus on stabilizing and supporting the parents and adults in the household.
Yeah. David, I know a lot of the work of Robin Hood really goes to dealing with the issue of poverty and really fighting the systemic poverty that continues to pervade our city and our state. When we look at this issue of really wrapping around young people at such an early age, we know that they are sometimes the most vulnerable population when it comes to this whole thing of poverty. A little bit more from you as to, you know, Robin Hood and really your commitment to wanting to see better within our community.
Yeah, I think that's a great question. And really it all comes down to the fact that the best investments are the earliest investments. And I think, you know, Robin Hood is starting to shift in that direction. The city, the state, the country is really starting to acknowledge that. And so we're really proud that these 50 organizations can receive at first $25,000 to advance this mission of supporting 0 to 3s, but in rounds 2, they'll be able to access over $250,000, 10 organizations, and then in the last round, we'll have 3 awardees who receive $1 million to scale their program. So really, this is just the beginning, and yeah, really proud to be taking a step in this really important investment.
Yeah. And when you have organizations such as KHCC and so many across the city, I know it's got to be a good feeling because sometimes these organizations just need a little bit more access to resources to be able to do what they do. And so to have the access to resources, David, I want to hear from you as to what that really, you think that means from the area of being the giver. And then also, Alex, share with us on as being a receiver.
Absolutely. I mean, one of the things that we prioritize with Field for 50 is making this grant opportunity as accessible and as easy to access as possible. We were really thinking about, newer organizations, smaller organizations who might not have dedicated staff time to fill out complicated grant applications. So we tried to make Field for 50 a very accessible opportunity. And I think it shows in the numbers. So more than half of the Field for 50 winners are organizations that Robin Hood has never given a grant to before. So we're really trying to develop new relationships with community-based organizations that are doing critical work in New York City.
Agreed. I think that as an agency who's received this this grant and this opportunity, the piece about how accessible and flexible that funding is, we have been really surprised, and there's almost a sense of like, we don't believe it. Like there must be a catch here. There must be strings attached to what we can and cannot use this funding for. But no, to our surprise, it's incredibly flexible, which really, as a program that is so rooted in responding to the needs of the community as they arise, is exactly the kind of funding that we need, because oftentimes the grants that we already have access to are very limited or very specific to what we can use and not use that funding for. And so a lot of our families have very unique situations that this funding and this money will allow us to be able to support and address in a timely manner.
Yeah. And so, David, when we talk about these organizations, I think the biggest thing that Alex is talking about is like, hey, sometimes I get the money, but I now have the ability to do with it what I want. And there are a tendency to have a lot of strings attached. And I guess you guys are very intentional in saying, listen, we're reducing these strings so that way you can really make more connection.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it goes back to making the opportunity accessible. We know that those sort of reporting requirements, final report meeting, all of those sort of strings attached come with a required cost on the organization's staff time. And so we wanted it to be clear to organizations that, this award is about acknowledging the work that they've already done, about, celebrating the role that they're playing in the community. And sort of, we don't need a final report after they've been selected or anything like that. We don't need to direct the way they're using the money. We have trust in the 50 awardees to use that as they've already been doing to support parents and caregivers.
Yeah. Well, I want to thank you both for coming and being with us here on the show. It's certainly been glad to have you both sharing with us. And we want you to know that, first of all, congratulations, Alex, on the great work that you're doing. And then also, David, for being able to recognize KHCC and those other organizations that are really needing some help. And you actually, through Robin Hood, have been able to do that. So thank you both for being with us.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you so much for having us.
All righty. Well, we'll let you know if you want more information. Don't hesitate. You can visit the website at robinhood.org, and then also KHCC -nyc.org. Again, KHCC-nyc.org. We got more show. Don't go anywhere because Open continues coming up right after this. And welcome back. After serving his community through leadership with Catholic Charities of New York and as a priest in the church, our next guest has published his first book, What's the Message? Bible Basics for Busy People. The book breaks down the Bible into 25 key passages and their most important takeaways. And joining us to tell more details is the Executive Director of Catholic Charities of New York, Monsignor Sullivan. And Monsignor, great to have you.
Hey, thanks so much for welcoming me onto the show.
Oh, thank you. And so in your own kind of way, right, you're taking servant leadership, combining it and giving people some lessons, huh?
Well, I love the Bible. Okay. And so I just think it's a great book. It's got so much to help us to get through each day and to get through life, but it's pretty big book. And, I'm a New Yorker and we don't have a lot of patience. And I think a lot of my fellow New Yorkers don't have a lot of patience. So I said, is there a way we can kind of get the basics out to busy people? And that's what my book's about. It's saying, okay, it's a big book, 800,000 words, but can we pick maybe 25 key passages? And if you go through those, you get the story, you get what the key messages are there. So that's what I tried to do. And on kind of each of those passages, maybe offered a couple of paragraphs of my own ponderings or thoughts about how they might tie in to how we go through our day in the 21st century.
Yeah. So for you, it's got to be a good feeling because you have people now being able to read the Bible, a book that you so much love. And at the same time, you're really tailoring it to somebody who may be busy because we are working in a hustling, bustling society. And let's be honest, while faith is, something that a lot of people practice, sometimes having the ability to practice it by reading doesn't always happen as much as we like. So you made it pretty simple here.
Well, I tried to make it simple without being simplistic. I hope I captured authentically the message, although I didn't capture it all. And my hope is that people see by reading my kind of little 100-page book or so, that they say, hey, the Bible isn't as inaccessible or as far away or as distant from my daily life as, maybe I thought when it was such a big book. I'm hoping that they see there's a lot to the Bible. If they take it in chunks, it's going to help them get through their day in a way that they're better off because of it.
Yeah. And I know as Monsignor, you don't just want people to read it, but you want them to kind of live it out as well, right? And when we talk about living it out, it's been your mission to give back to others through the work that you do as a Monsignor and then Catholic Charities. But what's the message that you think, or what's the takeaway about giving back to others, particularly at a time like this with amidst our COVID pandemic?
So as people go through the basic message of the Bible, which I think even people who don't read the Bible know, is that religious people, Christians, Jews, and Muslims too, are supposed to have their faith be demonstrated in the way that they live their lives. And there's a lot of different parts to that, but one of the parts is that we do have to reach out and be in solidarity with our neighbors, our sisters and brothers, and in a particular way for our sisters and brothers who maybe have challenges, maybe those who don't have as much income as everybody else, those whom the world calls poor, and that we have a responsibility to be in solidarity to provide the help that we can, not in a condescending way, but in a way which understands that even people who are poor with challenges, they're made in God's image and likeness. And in some ways, maybe not material ways, they have a lot of things they can give back to others, even as they may need some material help. And that's what we try to do at Catholic Charities, to provide help to our neighbors in need, but in a way which creates hope for a better future for them. And at Catholic Charities, it could be a nutritious meal. It could be a helping hand with rent. It could be even building some affordable apartments that people can move into, or a variety of other ways, after school programs, summer programs, so that kids can fulfill their potential. That's what we're about at Catholic Charities, and it does flow from our spiritual roots, our spiritual legacy, even though our services, we proudly say, are open to people of all religions and no religions.
For you, it's been a tough time because Catholic Charities, since the pandemic, has continued its services. But not only has it continued its services, I know that you've seen an increase in services. Give us an inside look as to what it's been like for your organization navigating through this pandemic, given the fact that so many people had food insecurity, housing insecurity, and you were right there to meet them.
So let me give you three very simple but different examples. We deal with a number of people who have significant challenges in learning, developmental disabilities, some mental health issues. And for us, we provide residences 24 hours a day, 7 days a week in a safe, secure, and hopefully family-like setting for those. For those people during the pandemic, we couldn't close. Our staff had to come in and day out. They couldn't work remotely. So we supplied PPE, safety, we put safety protocols in. So that was one way we kept going during the pandemic. That was a critical need. Another way was the food insecurity that you mentioned. Now we have 30, 40 community food pantries throughout the New York area, but it wasn't enough. So we set up pop-up pantries where we drive up a truck or two on a particular day of the week, and we would distribute 200, 300, 400 grocery packages to families who were there. So much so that in the 18 months, beginning of this pandemic, we provided over 10 million meals to hungry New Yorkers. The third area I'm going to give you is the area of mental, emotional health. During this pandemic, a lot of people were stressed. And so some of our agencies pivoted. And even though people were in their apartments, they couldn't come in person, they did thousands upon thousands of telehealth sessions for people's well-being, emotional support. So those are three examples: on site, in residences, pop-up pantries for people who are hungry, those dealing with emotional issues, telehealth, so that they could still be served even though they couldn't physically come into our offices.
So for people who want to get in touch with you and get a way to get in contact with you about the book or the work of Catholic Charities, how do they go about doing that?
Go to our website, Catholic Charities New York, and you can find out all the information you need. I don't give people the URL anymore. I just say, go to Google. My good friend Google will get you to the Catholic Charities New York website.
All right. Monsignor, you got to leave it there, but thank you so much for joining us, and glad to be able to meet you. And then at the same time, thank you for the work that you've been doing, both on the faith side and then also on the public service side. Much thanks indeed.
Thank you for having me, and it was a pleasure to be with you. Thanks so much.
All righty. Want to let you know, Monsignor Kevin Sullivan, our guest here on Open. Now, he already told you to go to Google. I'm not going to do that. I'm going to tell you, see him on Instagram, Facebook. All you got to do is go to Catholic Charities NY, and there you can connect with them as well on social media. All right, we got more Open. Don't go anywhere. We return coming up right after this.
We built a media network for you.
BronxNet TV.
Come learn in your new state-of-the-art studios at Lehman College.
At Mercy College.
And coming soon to the South Bronx in the Hub.
Inspire with your stories, culture, history.
Your Bronx on BronxNet.
Engage with us.
Connect with us at your channels and at BronxNet.tv.
Learn, engage, inspire. BronxNet TV.
From the Bronx
to the world.
BronxNet.
The Blue Card is a not-for-profit organization assisting Holocaust survivors in need. Now, the organization recently launched its podcast, providing the Holocaust survivors a voice. The interviews highlight their life's challenges as well as their triumphs. Joining us now to share more is licensed psychologist, author, and filmmaker, Dr. Eva Fogelman. And we thank you, Dr. Fogelman, for being with us.
Thank you, Daren, for having me on the show and being able to share the work that the Blue Card is doing and bringing the voice of of Holocaust survivors, which we hope will also have implications for other people that are historically traumatized.
Yeah. And when we talk about the Blue Card, your organization is really helping those Holocaust survivors in a variety of different ways. And one of the ways that I know that you're doing is you're helping to give them a voice. And so share with us about why it's important for Holocaust survivors to have a voice, particularly at a time like this.
Well, Holocaust survivors felt very victimized for many years. So it's very difficult, very different to have a historical trauma as opposed to being just persecuted, by a parent or sexually abused. This was a trauma that people experienced for 6 years, some of them for 12 years if they came from Germany. And when they first came to the United States, they were seen as people that there was something wrong with them mentally. They must be disturbed in some way. And so they were not embraced in any way. Nobody wanted to hear their stories. Everybody said, oh, you just got to America. This is a new country. Forget about what had happened. So it's only since, I would say, probably like the mid-'80s, which is, we're talking about 2 generations, 40 years later, that Holocaust survivors even began to share what their experiences were. And as Holocaust survivors get older, they begin to talk more about the past because we have more long-term memory than short-term memory when we get older. So this has become something very important because Holocaust survivors who have never shared their story before are beginning to share their story. Also, as any people get older, one of the things that happens is that people want to feel like they are leaving something behind, that they are teaching the next generation. And so one of the things we're trying to teach with the podcast that we began with the Blue Card, Stories of Holocaust Survivors Overcoming Historical Trauma, is to show not only the Holocaust survivors themselves, that indeed, yes, some of them had difficult lives, adjusting certainly the first couple of years till they found a place that would take them, because no country wanted to take refugees. I mean, today we're seeing, 2 million people from the Ukraine are being embraced after the Holocaust. Holocaust survivors were in displaced persons camps for some of them for 6 years before they found a country that would take them so that they can begin a new life.
Yeah.
And
Hey, I didn't mean to cut you, but I wanted to ask you about this because when we talk about Holocaust survivors and telling the story of Holocaust, we know that there's a lot of misinformation out there. And I know that one of the things that you talked about is that you want to be able to kind of like debunk some of that misinformation and be able to give clarity to what it's like for a Holocaust survivor and the families of those.
Right. So one of the things that is the misinformation is that, everybody's saying, oh, if you've been traumatized, you have post-traumatic stress disorder. And one of the things we need to understand about post-traumatic stress disorder, yes, there's about 50% of the people who have traumatic stress disorder symptoms, certainly nightmares, depression, anomie, which is, not wanting to socialize with people, using isolation as a defense, or being triggered. For Holocaust survivors, if they see a policeman, they may run across the street because who took them out of their houses in the middle of the night to be deported to ghettos, to concentration camps. And so what we need to understand, for example, about post-traumatic stress disorder is that, first of all, you don't have it every day of your life after you have been traumatized. It is sporadic. There are triggers that, bring it on, and you have times where, it's in abeyance and you're functioning normally. And sometimes you may have a trigger and it may just last a couple of hours. One of the things that I tell people, of course, is not to watch too much of television during this time, because this is something when we're seeing, the killings in the Ukraine, when we're seeing the refugees, I tell people don't, particularly Holocaust survivors, other people who've been historically traumatized. Whether we're talking about Bosnia, whether we're talking about people in the Sudan, I say, don't watch too much of the scenes. Just read about it in the paper so that indeed you will not get triggered. So even if somebody.
But I'm sorry, but you yourself, when you talk about being a family of a Holocaust survivor, you have these triggers yourself, right? Because when you look at what you see right now with Russia and the Ukraine, you're finding a lot of similarities. Can you share a little bit about what it is that you see that really resonates with you?
Sure. So one of the things is seeing the refugee people trying to escape from the Ukraine and trying to find some kind of refuge. My mother came from a small town not far from Warsaw when the Germans invaded September 1, 1939. A few days later, my mother got on a horse and buggy with her mother and father and 5 siblings, and they kept going east. And they ended up in Białystok, where they were part of hundreds and hundreds of other people who were escaping Poland, and they all slept on the floor in synagogues. They hardly had any food, and then they had to keep going east. Anyway, they had a very long journey. They were in a labor camp in Russia. They had to go back, and then eventually they were in Siberia and western part. And obviously, seeing what's happening is triggering my own feelings and my own images of what it was like for my mother and her family. And you have to remember that as they were going east, they were constantly dodging the bombs that were being thrown, and they were just one of the lucky ones that didn't get hit by a bomb. Yeah. And people who remained in my mother's town in Vyshkov, most of them were killed because the synagogue was set on fire, the schools were set on fire, and very few survived from that town.
If you're just joining us, we're talking about the Blue Card. Dr. Eva Fogelman is helping us out with letting us know a little bit more about what is going on in terms of providing services for Holocaust survivors, and then at the same time also being able to tell their stories. So, Dr. Fogelman, before we go, tell people where they can go to be able to latch on to this podcast and how they can lock in.
They can see it. It's on Spotify and one other one. And I think we're going to hopefully maybe try to get it also on YouTube as well. And we're trying to get all kinds of survivors who came from the different countries and who have had all kinds of different walks of life. And not just to show the resilience of the people, but also to show what it took for them to become resilient after having lost their families, after having lost their home, after having lost their language, and having to begin all over again. And one of the things we have to remember is that a lot of them were young children who lost completely their teen years. And what we're seeing is that obviously those who were able to survive with mother and father and were able to get an education despite the years that they lost, were able to cope better than those people who didn't have a parent that survived the war, and those who weren't able to have an education, who completely missed out on those years.
Yeah. Well, Dr. Fogelman, I want to thank you so much for sharing with us the story. There are some challenges and there also are some triumphs. Of course, you'll be able to share those with people on the Holocaust podcast. So thank you so much for being with us. And we look forward to talking to you soon.
Thank you very much. And I think that lots of other people who've been historically traumatized, not only in this country, but we're talking about African Americans and Native Americans, will also be able to relate to what it takes to begin life anew.
Yeah. Well, I want to let our viewers know if you want more information, don't hesitate to go to her website at evafogelman.com. And then also the bluecardfund.org. Those are two websites where you can get more information. Now, we want you to stay with us because we do have more show. We're coming right back with more Open right after this. And welcome back to the show. City Island recently opened its first Black-owned seafood restaurant. Seafood Kingz 2 recently held its grand opening last month. Now, the first Seafood Kingz restaurant held steady at the onset of the pandemic, even as businesses around them shuttered and New York City became the nation's pandemic hotspot. Joining us now to share more details, we are pleased to have the partner and general manager of Seafood Kingz 2, Charles DeWindt, also known in the industry as Big Max. And thank you so much for joining us. Congratulations.
Hey, thank you for having me.
Talk to me about this being on City Island, because we know that it's historic in its own nature. First of all, to be on City Island, and then to be the first African-American restaurant on City Island. That's got to be a major accomplishment. Talk to us about that feeling.
Oh, let me tell you something. Right now, this is monumental. You know what I mean? This is American history. You know, when you go to the History Channel, we're going to be there. This is history. It's amazing. It's great. It's great.
Yeah. What does it feel like for you? Because obviously you have your restaurant right there in the heart of City Island. Anybody who comes across that bridge, we know we're hungry for seafood. But to be there, to be an African-American owned restaurant, and to say, listen, I'm right here. I mean, we're talking about it's 2022. And in 2022, to have a landing spot and to be able to say that I'm an owner and I'm servicing my community, what does that mean?
You know what? It's unbelievable. You know, and to able to be in the game for a very long time and to service the community in different areas, and now to hit, you know, the island. This is like Broadway, you know, this is Main Street, and now and able to really service the community. You know, this is next level. This is next level for Seafood Kingz. This is, like I said before, this is monumental.
Yeah,
you know, this is monumental. This is the next generation. This is for the next generation. You know what I mean? That's what this is. Family, the next generation. You know what I mean? Yeah, that's what it is.
The journey to get into City Island was a pretty long one. Talk to us about what it took for you to be able to get there.
Do you really want to know? Nah,
yeah, we got a few seconds here. You can share.
Nah. But you know, we encourage each other. You know, I do a lot of talking, and I talk to B, I talk to the family, I talk to my family, and you know, we had some hurdles, but we kept going. You know what I mean? And that's what it was. Like, to get us to this point was just an amazing thing. Maybe people that was supposed to get on didn't get on. Maybe it wasn't meant, but you know, we kept pushing, and then by the grace of God, you know, things happen, and then here we are.
Yeah. So what's it been like since the grand opening up until now? Talk us how are things going in the restaurant?
Very busy. Very busy. We setting up systems to make sure that we can better service the community. You know, there's a lot of people that we got a nice little fan base. So now they come in here following us. So it's a little hectic, but we servicing. We making sure we do the best to service the community.
Yeah.
You know, as far as our presentation, the taste, you know, we make sure that we consistent, you know what I mean, with it, you know.
And for you, this is the second restaurant. You've had the first one, and You were able to be a staple and also stay bold during the pandemic. What do you feel was the key for you in being able to navigate the pandemic and see stability, and then at the same time also see profitability?
Right. Well, the first restaurant in Queens was more of Daryl's. That was they opened up from Bruckner. So it was him, his kids, his children. They was able to make it happen. Like I said before, they was on it. They were on top of it. And at the time, I was at another restaurant, being a consultant and also making it happen through the pandemic, which was amazing. You know what I mean? For both of us. So it was the best time for us. You know what I mean? It was the best time for both restaurants.
For somebody who doesn't know where you're located, why don't you tell them where you're located?
We are located at 634 City Island Avenue. We're right off the bridge on your left side, right next door to the coffee shop.
And to come across that bridge and to be able to see your restaurant when you've come across that bridge so many times before and it was somebody else's spot, now to have your spot, you say this, the feeling is unbelievable. What kind of response are you getting from the community when they come across and they see this African-American restaurant?
Oh, they're like, yo, wow, we gotta go support them. We gotta go support them. And and the thing about this spot here, we have the seafood, all that seafood stuff, the crab, the fish, the salmon with the soul food trimmings. You know what I mean? So that's what's gonna make us a little different than what's going on the island. We got the seafood trimmings, cooked fresh every day.
And you're right on time because listen, we're right here and spring is launching. I know it doesn't always quite feel that way, but spring is launching. Right. And getting ready for the summer. Anything special you want to tell the public about what could be coming their way?
Well, soon we're gonna be having special drinks and nice, just come on down. We're gonna have flavors for our wings. Just look for a great experience. It's gonna be really something special.
Well, Big Mac's definitely been good to have you, and thank you for sharing with us, and congratulations, all the best success for you right over there, and we want people to know that you come into City Island, go right to the left, and you'll find the restaurant right there. Thanks so much, brother.
That's right. Thank you, brother. Thank you.
All righty. Well, I want people to know, listen, if you want more information, if you want to find out more about Big Mac's, the store, and the restaurant, I should say, go check it out. Listen, visit their website, seafoodkings.inc2.business.site. And you can also give a call, 718-975-7447. And you can find out more information. First African-American seafood restaurant on City Island, history and a real thing that you could be able to see in the flesh when you talk about history. Some things you read, some things you'll be able to see. You'll be able to see that in the flesh. All right, listen, I want to let everybody know we come to the end of our show today. I want to thank all of our guests for joining us, and most of all, you, the viewer, for tuning in. Now, if you missed any part of today's show, you can catch the Recablecast on Channel 67. Also, you can catch it on Verizon Files, Channel 2133, or anytime on the web at bronxnet.org. Now, if you want another brand new episode of Open, we encourage you to come back on Friday morning. My girl, Rena Valentine, will bring you the best of arts and entertainment. Until next week, I'm Daren Jaime saying take care, God bless, and most of all, keep this channel wide open.